Now, let's turn to Nepal and Everest. It's been the deadliest climbing season for years and also the busiest climbing season ever. If the weather window was one problem, the way the authorities manage Everest has come under massive scrutiny. Well, in just a moment here, we'll talk to Nepal's Prime Minister about that and other issues affecting his country. But first, here's Navin Singh Khadka.
The new normal on the highest peak of the world. The queue to the summit gets longer and longer as the Nepalese government aims to bring in more tourists. But the good weather window allowing climbers to reach the summit has always been limited. As a result, this happened. Climbers had to wait for hours on their way up and down.
It really comes down to this year a deadly confluence of three factors. You had a limited number of suitable weather days. The second is that you had a record number of permits issued by Nepal, along with a requirement each person has to hire a guide. And then the third is that due to the market forces, there are now companies that are offering Everest at the lowest price ever. So that's bringing in a bunch of people that really just don't have the experience. And you have some guides that simply aren't qualified.
The government also deployed nearly 60 officials to regulate the expedition teams. But our investigation showed not even 5 of them stayed at the base camp, and the rest went home or did not even turn up. Now, authorities plan to bring in 2 million tourists next year, and expedition operators are excited about that. But they agree managing the traffic jam on the highest peak remains a Himalayan task, especially when something goes wrong. Navin Singh Khadka, BBC News.
Well, Nepal's Prime Minister KP Oli is here with me in the studio. Welcome here to the programme. Prime Minister, was it a mistake to give out so many climbing permits this year?
Exactly speaking, that's a rumour. And not so many climbers are given permit.
381 permits,
yeah,
a record number.
That's not that much number.
It's a record number.
One season, the talk were begun when the climbers were waiting for the good weather. Number of climbers were waiting for good weather, and they had to wait, because they cannot just today, tomorrow, day after, they cannot. Sometimes they have to wait for many days, and then they can get...
There were 2 weather windows, and that was a problem, but 381 permits, which meant, with the guides, 600 different climbers on the mountain. And we've seen the pictures, the almost traffic jams on Everest. Is it not time, with the number of deaths we have also seen, for a rethink? Is it not time for that?
Yeah, it is necessary to rethink. But as the propaganda is over there, that sort of very complicated situation is not over there. But even then...
it's not propaganda to talk about the amount of permits, to talk about the amount of climbers, to talk about the amount of deaths. Were you disturbed by the revelations also that out of 60 liaison officers on the mountain, only 5 stayed on the mountain? Did that disturb you?
Of course, we have to be careful about the permission we provide to the mountaineers.
Of course, but the liaison officers who are supposed to be there helping with navigating all those different people on the mountain. Let me just read you a quote from the Tourism Ministry, who said, "I admit that not all of our liaison officials stayed there for long. We are aware of this issue. We're working to address it." Another government official at base camp told the BBC, since almost none of the liaison officers stayed, it became very difficult for the limited officials to handle this huge number of climbers. That must disturb you, to know you have officials that are supposed to be organising this, but they have stayed at home. They've taken the money, but they have stayed at home.
Yeah, we have to give attention in the days to come to control the number of the climbers. But the deaths of the climbers is not because of the traffic jam or queue in the mountains. That is different thing. So
perhaps there's a contribution of all those things I mentioned. Just a last question on Everest, because we saw in that report there's a big push to get 2 million tourists to come to Nepal next year. Are you going to have this rethink about the way you manage Everest before we get to that stage?
Yeah. We have amended some regulations, like one person at least, how many guides they must have, and how many cylinders of oxygen, and what kind of preparations, etc., and what can be the appropriate number to climb.
The appropriate numbers and enforcing that those liaison officials do stay where they're supposed to be. Let me turn to the other major issue for your country. Of course, you've joined China's Belt and Road Initiative, that huge initiative that's taking place. How important is that for Nepal?
We have to understand that Nepal has completed the political transformation, and concentration of political issues is now over, and we are concentrating our efforts on good governance and political economic development.
But as part of that initiative, I think I've listed them here: 3 airports, fast-track roads, rail tracks. That's all going to be built in the coming years. Are you sure that your country can afford to do that, because it's done with the sort of loan system with the Chinese? Do you have any worries that that you might end up where Sri Lanka has ended up? They built a port, they've had to end up leasing it back to China because they couldn't afford the loans.
We invite foreign investment and we accept loans according to our necessity and our priority. Randomly we do not accept. So we are not accepting any type of loan. And we don't want to talk about the experiences of others, but so far our experience is we can manage all these things, and with calculation we have done this.
2 quick final points then. The environmental impact of that list of infrastructure that you have planned. Of course, a lot of it cuts across protected areas, forests. I think for the international airport that you're planning to build, you have to cut down 2.5 million trees. Is it worth it, the environmental impact of all of that?
If we cut 1.5 million of trees, then 5 million of trees we can replant, because we have we are training rivers, and land we are acquiring from there too, and we have 45% of forest, and so far the question of environment is we are contributing a lot. 17% of our land is covered with snow, ice, and all weather, 13% of land is covered with ice. And it is contributing to recharge, recleaning, and recooling the air and earth as well. And our forest is contributing a lot, because 45% of our entire land is forest. And altogether, we have dedicated 62% of our land for environmental question. So, and this year, we are launching campaign to plant some more than tens of million trees.
So all of those plans in place to counterbalance any sort of negative from that.
Of course, as you draw attention that when we are giving stress, importance to the development efforts, then always there is danger of degradation or negligence of environmental aspects. But we are careful about that.
All right, Prime Minister, we have run out of time, but thank you so much for your time and joining me here on today's programme. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sharma.